What are they thinking? The straight facts about the risk taking, social networking, still developing teen brain by Aaron M. White and Scott Swartzwelder. During the teen years, the brain transitions from dependency on adults to relative autonomy. Teen years fall within the period of human development called adolescence. Generally, the transition occurs between the ages 10 to 24. While often fraught with anxiety, peril, and many moments of dazed confusion, adolescence is also a crucial time for self-discovery and personal growth. The adolescent urge to flee the nest is actually a biological imperative, not a behavioral or personality-driven choice. I had been raised in the ways of the British stiff upper lip that culturally compels us to hide our emotions and show reserve and strength in times of adversity. Magnetic resonance imaging, or MRI, has allowed scientists to learn an incredible amount about the teen brain. Studies have revealed that the antiquated idea of adolescence as a quiescent time in terms of brain development is far from accurate. In reality, it's a time of massive rewiring. Functional magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI, is a related technique that allows us to study how and where the brain processes information while people perform various tasks, think various thoughts, and feel various feelings. The combination of these techniques, MRI and fMRI, lets us measure how brain structure changes during adolescence and how the teen brain handles different tasks at different ages. The changes being discovered by researchers are unique to adolescence and are not an extension of the way the brain develops in childhood. These changes are responsible for the problems teens have with predicting consequences and making forward-thinking decisions, why they seem stuck on emotional overload, and why the teen years are so volatile. The brain is divided into several distinct lobes, including the famous frontal lobes, the less well-known parietal lobes on the sides of the brain, the distant but crucial occipital lobes at the very back of the brain, and the curvaceous temporal lobes, which bend around the lower part of each hemisphere like the thumb of a boxing glove. The frontal lobes are the captains of the ship. They coordinate, promote, and suppress the actions of other brain areas as we make plans and decisions. More than any other brain structures, they are responsible for our success or failure as adult humans. Indeed, it is the abundance of frontal lobe tissue and the resulting ability to self-reflect and think abstractly that separates human from even the most sophisticated non-human species. The temporal lobes, right behind the temples, process complex sounds like the words, music, and cell phone ringtones. The temporal lobes also contain the hippocampus, critical for storing new information. The volume of gray matter in the temporal lobes plateaus at the age 16 to 17. As with the frontal lobes, the amount of gray matter in the parietal lobes peaks around age 11 and decreases throughout adolescence. Located on the sides and towards the back of the brain, the parietal lobes are primarily involved in processing physical sensations such as touch and spatial relationship, including where the body is relative to other objects nearby. Ultimately, it's the changes in brain wiring and not simply hormones that make adolescence such a distinct period of development. The basic layout of the brain is established by genes, but the wiring is also dependent upon experience. The brain is remarkably complex and still poorly understood. The key types of cells that handle the complex web of functions by the brains are the neurons and the glial cells. Several recent brain imaging studies using MRI and fMRI indicate that key areas in the area related to emotion are particularly reactive during adolescence. For instance, when processing emotions, teenagers exhibit greater increases in activity in the amygdala than children and adults do. The amygdala, a small almond-shaped structure located just in front of the hippocampus in the temporal lobes, with one on either side of the brain, plays a prominent role both in evoking emotions responses and remembering what provoked those emotions, particularly negative ones. Unfortunately for teens, turning the amygdala off can be difficult. Greater activity in the amygdala during adolescence can periodically turn your teenager into an emotionally overwrought time bomb just waiting to explode. The development of the brain during adolescence allows us to feel our emotions and then express them in a socially appropriate version. The teenager turning into a time bomb emotionally is not merely more emotional. Rather, the adolescent brain has not yet developed the adult ability to balance emotional reactivity with cognitive regulation, the capacity for Captain Frontal Lobe to negotiate with the drama queen amygdala in order to avoid a meltdown. Knowing that teens are overrun with emotions, are ravenous for rewards, have high hair-trigger stress responses, love to take risks, and have extreme difficulty using their frontal lobes to control emotions makes it easier to handle their season of discontent by finding and suggesting better ways to relax, enjoy, and ultimately thrive. The experience is like a bird leaving the nest in a slow motion. Our kids already come hardwired to give us a good hard shove and to spread their wings and begin their own slow, often less graceful migration towards the exit sign. For the typical teen, it is normal, natural, and even healthy to dislike parents and all they represent, at least for a time, in order to push away and begin heading for the door. These are all signposts that teens are on the right track, that they are experiencing normal adolescent development. ADHD, or Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, is generally considered a learning deficit rather than a disorder of thinking or emotion. So most people don't think of it as a mental illness. It is one of the trickiest and yet most common disorders afflicting adolescents. In general, people with ADHD tend to have symptoms that fall into one or more categories. 1. Inattention. Fails to pay attention to detail or makes careless mistakes, has difficulty sustaining attention in tasks or plays, appears not to be listening when spoken to directly, can't follow through on instructions, has difficulty organizing tasks and activities, is easily distracted by extraneous stimuli, and is often forgetful in daily activities. 2. Hyperactivity. Can't stop fidgeting or squirming when told to sit down, can't stop standing up, has difficulty engaging in leisure activities quietly, and can't stop talking. Impulsivity. blurts out answers before questions are completed, has difficult awaiting turn, and often interrupts or intrudes on others. It is very difficult to learn if you can't pay attention. Attention is crucial to learning and therefore a critical component of adolescent development as well as of success and happiness in the adult world. The act of paying attention is largely a frontal lobe mediated process, and during adolescence, our frontal lobe CEO hones its ability to direct attention, sustain it, and even split it when necessary. Research suggests that the brain mechanism that underlies ADHD involves fully communication between the frontal lobes and an area of the brain called the striatum. The striatum plays critical roles in planning voluntary movements and processing time. Damage to this region is one cause of Parkinson's, in which people progressively lose the ability to voluntarily move their muscles. The main chemical messenger involved in communicating between the frontal lobes and the striatum is dopamine. Increasing dopamine activity in the brain is the best strategy yet developed for normalizing communication between the frontal lobes and striatum and ameliorating the symptoms of ADHD. Even though we don't exactly understand what causes it, there are effective treatments for ADHD, both pharmaceutical and behavioral. A large study examining the effectiveness of various treatments suggests that medication plus behavioral therapy is superior to therapy alone. Stimulants are the most commonly used class of drugs for treating ADHD. Drugs like Ritalin and Adderall can work very well if prescribed properly after a thorough diagnosis. Stimulants increase levels of dopamine in the frontal lobes, which allows circuits within the frontal lobes and between the frontal lobes and striatum to regulate attention, control impulses, and guide focused behavior. ADHD symptoms tend to decrease as people age into their 20s, which suggests better dopamine system with the development of the frontal lobes. The stimulants can be addictive if not taken properly, and it is also important to realize that although stimulants can help manage the symptoms of ADHD, there is no definitive cure. Depression is a disease characterized by intense pessimism, lethargy, a sense that nothing can be done to change things, and a lack of activity. One of the difficulties in understanding and dealing with depression is that each one of us from time to time exhibits signs of being depressed. It is only natural that after a breakup, when the stock market crashes or losing a job, we feel down in the dumps or that the universe is against us. We worry that things will never get better. What distinguishes normal periods of depression from the medical condition of depression is the length of time spent in the pit, whether we are able to climb out, and how fast we slide back into the storm of darkness. A clinically depressed person doesn't seem to be able to distinguish the internal state of despair and the actual conditions in the outside world. While an otherwise healthy person might fall into a puddle of emotional pain that passes, time healing wounds as external events improve, a person with a depression feels like she is drowning in despair, even though everything around her, like a job, health, and wealth, is fine. No matter how many times people point out how great everything is and encourage her to just get over it, the depressed person can't separate the good from the bad. A clue to the biology of adolescent depression lies in the puberty, the time at which hormonal changes begin. Prior to puberty, depression, anxiety disorders, and panic attacks are equally likely in boys and girls. After puberty, they are about twice as common in girls, strongly suggesting that sex hormones play a role in the emergence of the disorders even though they do not cause them. Mood is regulated by a dynamic interaction between the frontal lobes, the prefrontal cortex specifically, amygdala, hippocampus, hypothalamus, and the nucleus accumbens, all of which are ripe with hormone receptors and thus undergo robust changes at puberty. Hippocampus, which normally provides us with a healthy framework for grappling with stress, does not activate normally in depressed children and adolescents, hindering their ability to handle stress. The amygdala, which is responsible for assessing threats and filtering environmental stimuli, tends to be hyperactive in adolescents with depression. This could explain why a teenager daughter thinks you are launching the cruelest attack in history when all you have done is ask her if she is okay. The hypothalamus, which regulates the 4 F's of behavior: fighting, fleeing, feeding, and mating, releases hormones that cause testosterone, estrogen, cortisol, and adrenaline to be released, all of which affect mood. The nucleus accumbens, the heart of the brain's reward system, responds to dopamine. Because dopamine levels are lower throughout the brain during adolescence, there is less dopamine for the nucleus accumbens to respond, and therefore any mood may be darker during this time. Dopamine levels in the prefrontal cortex increase throughout adolescence, enhancing connections between all regions and therefore strengthening the ability to handle stress, which otherwise brings on depression and anxiety.